Hello, and welcome to the House of David Life Everlasting. I'm your host, Rob Bird. The House of David in Benton Harbor, Michigan has long been a source of intrigue and wonder. A couple years ago, I had the opportunity to make the film documentary, The House of David Life Everlasting, with my good friend Chris Siriano from Siriano's House of David Museum. This production won numerous film festival awards around the world. So when I had the chance to make this PBS series, I just couldn't resist. This episode, and part of the film that we're going to see today, is from the beginning and to when the House of David made it to Benton Harbor, Michigan. After that, Chris Siriano is going to join me in the studio, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what you just saw. So without any further delay, here it is, the House of David, Life Everlasting.
Telling incredible stories and keeping the past alive, Moondog Productions is proud to bring you the great history of the House of David in Southwest Michigan. Find out more about Moondog Productions by going online to moondogpro.net.
The House of David Museum is proud to tell the stories of Southwest Michigan's rich history. Located in St. Joseph, Michigan, the House of David Museum has a wide array of memorabilia for your viewing pleasure. To schedule a tour, call 269-325-0039.
Post-production facilities provided by True Blue Farms in Grand Junction, Michigan. True Blue Farms has been contributing to the overall health and wellness to people all over the world for over 100 years with blueberries. Find out more at truebluefarms.com.
Telling Southwest Michigan's history through radio and podcast. Rob Bird's Moondog Show and the House of David podcast are happy to be a part of telling this great story. Find Rob Bird's Moondog Show or the House of David podcast at podbean.com.
The story of the House of David has fascinated the minds of millions for over a century. It was a place in Michigan that was surrounded in mystery, religion, romance, baseball, travel, sex, scandal, and huge wealth. It was all based on a religious colony that called themselves the House of David. Their leader and founder, Benjamin Purnell, preached that if you followed him, you would have eternal life of the body and live forever on earth. Converts traveled to Benton Harbor, Michigan from all over the world to be a part of this colony and see for themselves what was being touted as paradise on earth. Many spoke of the feeling of being at the gates of heaven as they arrived to trumpets and bands playing. Everyone in beautiful attire, magnificent horses and carriages, opulent mansions to call home. The new members gave up all worldly possessions in exchange for everlasting life, and the House of David grew and grew. What began in early 1903 as a new and exciting Christian faith soon became so much more. This is the House of David, Life Everlasting.
Benjamin Purnell was born in Paducah, Kentucky in 1861, and he was born to a very destitute family at the time, the beginning of the Civil War. They had no money to basically raise their own kids. He was the seventh son in the family, and the story goes that his father used to give fire and brimstone speeches around the campfire at night, and very powerful sermons that he taught his kids. And the history shows that Benjamin's oldest brother took him on kind of as his own son, basically, because he was way down in the lineage of the family. And on his 14th birthday, his brother gave him a copy of the King James Bible and to read out of. And Ben memorized it front and back. He had a photographic memory. And he embraced that Bible like it was his whole world. And that's what got him the fuel started for his belief in God and Jesus and Christianity. And he took off on the road as a 16-year-old young guy, very charismatic and highly intelligent person. And he wanted to be an itinerant preacher. So he had a covered preacher's wagon that he traveled throughout the South and into the Midwest with, preaching what he said was the Word of God. And he came across the teachings of people that had come way back in the 1700s of the same type of Christian Jesuit faith. And the first one being Joanna Southcott, who started the faith, and then James Jezreel, John Rowe from Australia. But all these people laid the ground for the first through the sixth messengers, all preaching that the seventh and final messenger from God in this lineage of beliefs was going to come to the New World. And of course, we know the New World as America.
Benjamin had been married before, and the circumstance of his separation and divorce is still debated. And it just depends where you're coming from, how you're going to interpret all of that. He had a child by that first union. That child survived the two children that he had with Mary.
He fell in love with Mary when he was about 16 years old. She was also from the area, and fascinating, beautiful lady, kind of had a little bit of an American Indian look to her, extremely charismatic, extremely intelligent. And they had two children, Coy and Hetty, and that's how they started their life together.
They were married in Aberdeen, Ohio, which happens to be right across the river from where my wife was born and raised in Maysville, Kentucky. Now, a little smut novel came out in 1960 called The King of the Harem Heaven. It was written under a pen name for obvious reasons. It was not very credible, but was it interesting? Absolutely. In that novel, it mentioned that Mary was from Maysville, Kentucky. And when I talked about the colony, I had fun with this because no, she wasn't. My wife was. Mary was not.
And Mary was very supportive of Benjamin and his teachings, and actually she took great notes. So I give Mary, and most of history gives Mary the credit for having Benjamin's teachings in book form, because she's the one that wrote them all down as he talked and gave his sermons. She was there to dictate all that.
Ben and Mary's life together was a romance made in heaven. They knew their lives were forever to be servants of God.
They had been a part of a commune in Detroit called the God House under Prince Michael Mills. And there had been a sort of a dust-up within that colony. And Benjamin and Mary left the colony with their two children. And they, as they tell it, they wandered for 7 years. But they were preaching. They were preaching this idea that Benjamin was the seventh messenger and that the day of reckoning, or the millennium, is close at hand. They wind up in Fostoria, Ohio, where they gathered a few converts to their way of thinking.
They called it the God House, and they teamed up with Cora and Silas Mooney from Ohio, who were very wealthy corn farmers at the time. And the Moonies joined forces with Ben and Mary, and kind of a partnership with them. And they footed the bill to take all of these teachings to print. So that's the first time that Ben's word was actually in book form.
James Jezreel was that sixth messenger, and he had written some extracts about the belief that Benjamin and Mary had absorbed also. Well, there were Jezreelites living in Benton Harbor, the Boschke family, and Benjamin and Mary had been in contact with them. Now, a disastrous thing happens to the family in Fostoria. Their daughter, Hetty, was killed in a factory accident, an explosion. They were already in contact with people in Benton Harbor, and Benton Harbor looked like a good location for them to start this colony. And when the people, the community of Fostoria, became upset with thinking that Benjamin and Mary didn't properly attend to the funeral of their daughter.
I read a newspaper article on it where I guess they were right ahead of the crowd when they left. They wouldn't claim the body. They were basically run out of town because of that. The city itself had to bury their daughter Hattie.
Their thinking was that they thought if you believe, you're going to live forever. And of course she didn't. So there's some animosity in the community, and they take that as an opportunity to move to Benton Harbor and join up with the Boschkes.
They had just invented the first automobile a few years before that, and the Boschkes were part of the Sixth Church, of which Benjamin was teaching that he was the seventh messenger from God. The Boschkes had heard about Benjamin being in Ohio, Fostoria, Ohio, and having his own church called the God House there. And they invited him to Benton Harbor, Michigan, where they would team up with him to finance the beginning of the House of David Park and the House of David Faith, which started in the spring of 1903.
Right away, they are able to start building, farming some land. They had a few followers that came with them and a few that they gained with the Boschkes, etc. And one of the first buildings that they built was, I don't think they named it the Ark. I think the neighborhood Gentiles named it the Ark, thinking of Noah and the end of time coming. But that was their first dwelling there in Benton Harbor in 1903.
Benjamin taught that you had to be a vegetarian, very much like the Shakers, Christian. The vegetarian lifestyle meant no meat, no alcohol, no smoking cigarettes, and abstain from sex. So they did live a life of celibacy.
Part of Benjamin and Mary's preaching was that if you follow us as the seventh messenger, you will have an eternal life.
He would have giant crowds that would gather and listen to his teachings because he was extremely well informed about the Bible and could argue his teachings against other faiths and prove his points to people all along the way. And so she, it was a beautiful story that they traveled together from Kentucky all the way into Michigan.
The story that led Ben and Mary to Benton Harbor was a story of providence and passion.
Early on, the Australians landed because of the word being spread to them that he's here, and they were all studying under John Rowe, which was another messenger before Ben. They flocked in. I have pictures of like 4 teams of horses and carriages loaded up with people coming out of the outback to head to the ship canal to head to America. And then, of course, there's a famous picture of 85 Australians that joined on the same day, coming out of the ship canal in Benton Harbor, heading to the House of David, and they're playing musical instruments and singing. And amongst those people were actors and actresses and vaudeville talent. And so as people flocked in, they not only had massive amounts of members, but they had massive wealth, massive talent in music and all kinds of industries. And so that's how they grew and grew. They built so much. They had their own steamships and trolley cars and bus lines and hotels and restaurants and vegetarian restaurants and a park hotel. And they built the amusement park with the help of the Australian people that came in because of their brains. They knew about that type of thing.
Men of God are not typically known for making great entrepreneurs, but Ben had a vision, and this vision turned into a worldwide endeavor that had a massive impact on the entire world.
They recruited people from around the globe. They recruited a lot of highly intelligent Einstein-type brains that were extremely successful, many of them extremely well off, some of them just great workers, iron workers and farmers and artists and musicians. So they didn't really have specific guidelines that they said this person can only qualify. They would sit you down and they would ask you your story, and then they would ask you 14 questions about your faith and would you believe in Benjamin as your long-awaited Messiah.
You would correspond with them at their headquarters, and they would, if they felt that you were a good possibility for membership, they would issue a call to come home. And as a matter of fact, in those early days, around 1910, they had to tell people, wait until you get the call. There were several people that were wanting to come to the House of David, and they did evangelize. They sent out mission carriages. They sent out 4 men one time in a boat, a power boat, that went down the Mississippi, across the Gulf of Mexico, up the Atlantic coast, up the Hudson, Erie Canal, rode over 6,000 miles, and they were evangelizing all along the way, spreading the word.
I think what happened is that the preacher sounded compelling enough for them to come and, check out what the House of David was, because that was in the year before. And so when they came, they were here for a week. They came up by train. It must have just seemed like a paradise to them, because farming is hard work. But then when you have people and it's a working colony and they're all together, and they all have a purpose and all of this, it just seemed right to them.
The purpose that drove these people was so powerful that they gave up all their worldly possessions to the colony. In return, all their needs were met as long as they were being productive and contributing to the overall health of the community.
You're giving up everything. When an Israelite says, "my shirt," he means our shirt. Everything was held in common. So they gave up all worldly possessions when they joined the House of David. And then their living was taken care of, and they gave and did whatever they could. There are contracts, and in the book that I wrote, I published some of those contracts showing what they would give up and what they would agree to. So, it looks legal to me, but as we know, what's legal is sometimes it changes.
In exchange for giving up all your worldly possessions, you had to give your life to this cause. You had to do anything that they asked you to do. And one thing in history shows that if you and I had certain talents that we really didn't expand on prior to the House of David, but we had those hidden talents, they could find that out in us. And if you were really a sculptor, and right now you're a musician and a filmmaker, but really in real reality you were a great sculptor, they would find that out. They would give you a team of artists around you with the money and the housing to create something world class. So your sculpting abilities would become known throughout the world.
I think there's some truth in it. And I think that's true of Sister Mary also. She had the ability to suggest to people like Andrew Ferguson, who came all the way from New Zealand just about a year before she died. And according to Andrew, he told me, she said, "Your place is on the Rocky." Well, he thought that was to go out to the Rocky Farm down near Berrien Springs and work. Well, he wound up at Sister Mary's Fireproof Hotel in downtown Benton Harbor, and that's where he worked, and he really enjoyed it down there, had a good time.
And that's what they did with all of their members. They figured out what they were best at, and they raised that to the highest possible spot. And people loved living there. They loved their lives there. I've interviewed hundreds of people, thousands of people actually related to this story, but hundreds of people that were part of this story, straight attached to it, and they absolutely loved life there.
They had several musical groups, singing groups, jazz band, those kinds of things that they also became popular, and they also toured. As well as the baseball team, of course. And traveling with the baseball team, they would have people that would be disseminating literature and evangelizing as they went along.
I asked them, other than Ben, what was the biggest point and the turning point of the story of the House of David? And they told me that they thought it was the arrival of the Australians. Because when Australia joined the rest of the group, they brought with them so much musical talent. Some of the most famous musicians on that part of the world came to join the House of David. So at that time, they brought music to the House of David, and which means that equates to orchestras and bands and vaudeville shows and jazz bands and syncopep bands and blues bands and ukulele bands. And so they formed all these bands and all this music to be played down in the amusement park.
Welcome back to the studio. As explained earlier, Chris Suriano, my co-host, is here now, and we're here to talk about what we just saw, which was the beginning parts of the House of David Life Everlasting documentary, which really kind of went in from the beginning to getting here to Benton Harbor. So, and that's where we're going to pick up. Now they're here in Benton Harbor. Why has that been such an important part for the community?
It left a branding mark on not only Benton Harbor, but Michigan and the history of America, because of the fact that they had a huge, not only a huge group of people with like Einstein brains, but they created one of the most followed baseball teams, amusement park, and industry that ever landed in Benton Harbor or Michigan, for that matter.
What happened? What was the big explosion? Why did it take off? Why was it such a big deal?
Because they started with a big group of Australians that came from the outback, basically Sydney and Melbourne, Australia, and they wanted to open an amusement park because they had a small one there, and there was nothing like that in the Midwest before they landed here. So they opened up an amusement park as an attraction to bring people like us to come see what they were all about. They would teach us about their faith, but they wouldn't try to recruit us then. And it just grew from there. It went from baseball to trolley cars and bus lines and hotels and restaurants and jam and jelly factory and on and on and on. They just grew and grew and grew. And because Benton Harbor was on the cusp of a huge growth anyway, is considered the metropolis of the Midwest back in 1915 or earlier, it was a perfect time for them to set down roots.
Yeah. Now, you have pretty much dedicated your whole life to the history of the House of David. Why have you found it to be an important part of needing to, still tell these stories?
I feel like it's one of the most important pieces of American history that could easily be forgotten. I studied history in college for 8 years, and the history of America is very fascinating, but the history of the House of David was right here in our backyard.
Yeah.
And nobody was doing anything to save it. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to learn it, I'm going to teach it, I'm going to share it. And that's what I've been doing for, 35 years.
Yep.
So.
And that's where we met. And I came to see the museum, and we talked about, actually what I said is, well, by the way, Chris, I make documentaries too.
Right.
And that's where it started. That's where we're at. We did the House of David, Life Everlasting, the Bearded Boys of Baseball. We have a third that's kind of in the middle of production, and we'll see kind of where that goes here in the future. But
Until then, we're making a TV show, and like all TV shows, our time has come to an end for this one, but we want to make sure that folks tune in to us next week. We're going to be talking about High Island, which is a fascinating story about the House of David. So, yeah. And then we'll also talk a little bit about Mary's Fireproof Hotel, which is a very, very interesting story in Benton Harbor. But until then, from Chris Siriano and myself, we'll see you on the House of David, Life Everlasting.
Telling incredible stories and keeping the past alive, Moondog Productions is proud to bring you the great history of the House of David in Southwest Michigan. Find out more about Moondog Productions by going online to moondogpro.net.
The House of David Museum is proud to tell the stories of Southwest Michigan's rich history. Located in St. Joseph, Michigan, the House of David Museum has a wide array of memorabilia for your viewing pleasure. To schedule a tour, call 269-325-0039.
Post-production facilities provided by True Blue Farms in Grand Junction, Michigan. True Blue Farms has been contributing to the overall health and wellness to people all over the world for over 100 years with blueberries. Find out more at truebluefarms.com.
Telling Southwest Michigan's history through radio and podcast. Rob Bird's Moondog Show and the House of David podcast are happy to be a part of telling this great story. Find Rob Bird's Moondog Show or the House of David podcast at podbean.com.